Good evening, everyone. I pray that your Sunday was filled with spaces and places of joy, of peace, of happiness, and that your Monday, since it's almost over, was a good day also. Today, I posted something that said, sometimes you have to learn to be quiet, even when you've got a lot to say. Let me repeat that. Sometimes you have to learn to be quiet, even when you've got a lot to say. And I'm going to look at this from two different perspectives. And so the first one is, you know, a lot of times, particularly for people who've been traumatized, um, there is a need to try to protect yourself, to defend yourself. If you feel like a situation is potentially dangerous, now I'm going to say dangerous in quotes, then your first impulse is to protect yourself, to defend yourself. The problem is that your trauma brain, the reptilian part of your brain, doesn't recognize a big threat from a little threat. And it sometimes interprets things as being a threat when they probably or may not necessarily be so. And so, for example, if someone questions you, why did you do so and so? We don't necessarily, for the persons who are traumatized, we don't necessarily hear it as just a question. We may hear it as, why are you attacking my character? What are you trying to say? And we begin to get defensive. Or, what does this mean? Why are you coming at me? When all the person really asked was a question. And I'm not saying that that this does not happen to people who have not been traumatized. But my focus is for persons who have, because so many of us have endured traumas that we have not healed from or even acknowledged at this point. And so, in that instance, sometimes, when someone's saying something to you, as you begin to feel yourself beginning to have your anxiety rise or your anger begins to boil up in you, as you begin to feel that, you may want to take the time to stop, breathe, and kind of be quiet and just listen to allow the person to say what they needed to say so you can hear them fully. Because the other thing that happens when we're being defensive is we're already formulating our response while the person's talking. So we may very well be missing a great deal of what they're saying, you know. Um, so to stop and pause and be quiet. Now, how many of you know that that can be so hard to do? It can be hard to do because maybe in your childhood, if you grew up with childhood trauma, you know, um, because you did not want whatever punishment or whatever was going to come along with the accusation, you quickly tried to defend yourself. You quickly tried to get yourself out of it. You quickly tried to blame somebody else. Whatever you did, whatever means necessary to try to keep yourself safe. And now that you're no longer in that situation, you're still doing it as an adult. And that's why we say sometimes you have to learn to be quiet. And you may say, well, it just happens so quickly. I go from 0 to 100 just like that. Well, one of the things that you can learn is to notice when you're starting to get agitated. Your heart will begin to pump a little harder. You may begin to feel like a little sweat, a little perspiration. Your breathing may become a little bit more shallow. Your hands may ball into fists. Your shoulders you may find that they're up there. So one quick sign when you're beginning to hear something, when someone's questioning you or you feel like you're being attacked, is see where your shoulders are. Just drop them. And if you can drop them, then you know that you are beginning to get tense. The second situation where I really think it's important to sometimes you have to learn to be quiet even when you have a lot to say is dealing with your children, whether they're under the age of 18 or adults. For a lot of parents, you wonder why your children don't talk to you. You wonder why your relationship with your children may not be the relationship that you want. And it may be a myriad of reasons, I don't know. But one thing I would invite you to consider is maybe how you communicate with your child, whether they are underage or adults. Are you communicating simply to get your point across? Or are you communicating with the idea of, I'm going to do more listening than talking? I want to find out, I want this to be a safe place for my child. I want to find out what my child thinks and how they feel. I don't want to continue to put my feelings and my beliefs on them. And that's what happens when your voice is the more predominant voice when you're in conversation with your children, whether they are minors or adults. And I keep saying minors or adults because some of us struggle with changing our parenting patterns. Even though our children are now adults and may have families of their own, we still want to be the mama. We still want to be the daddy. We still believe that our opinion is the only opinion that matters. But guess what? That will impede relationship. It will impede conversation. And I'm not telling you to agree with everything that your child says, whether they're underage or adult. What I am saying is sometimes it pays to be quiet and just listen. Because if you listen, your child, your spouse, your partner, your whoever may be more inclined to share, particularly if they feel like they're being able to share without being judged, without being shamed, without being criticized. And that's exactly what I want for myself. That when I am talking to someone, I want them sometimes to just listen to me so I can feel safe and so I can feel not judged and not criticized. And I'm a firm believer in whatever we want for ourselves, we need to practice giving it to others. And the second half of this thing says sometimes you have to learn to be quiet even when you've got a lot to say. And that does not mean that what you have to say is not important, but it may not be the time to say it. It may not be the right moment. Timing is everything. And that's a whole nother message in ourselves. So I'm going to end this and encourage you to pay attention to the physical signs that you're getting defensive and you've just got to say your piece. Are you clenching up? Are your shoulders up by your ears? Is your heart beginning to beat a little harder? Is your breath or your breathing becoming more paced? Do you feel, some people kind of feel the anger rising inside of them. If you're feeling that, then stop. Take a couple of deep breaths, maybe even 5. And even during that time period while you're taking those 5 deep breaths, guess what? You're opening up a space to listen. And you're listening not necessarily to be understood, but so that you can understand. Again, you're opening up a space not necessarily to be understood, but that you can understand, so that when you allow yourself to respond, you're responding from a place of love. You're responding from a place of respect. You're responding from a place of peace. You're responding from a place where you have not allowed your fearful emotions, your defensive emotions to overshadow what you really feel in your heart. I love you all, and I will talk with you tomorrow. Remember, sometimes you have to learn to be quiet, even when you've got a lot to say. And I would encourage us to practice that intentionally. Bye-bye.